everyone, this is Miss Herman, and
Mr. Barroso is a special guest.
I wanted to bring Mr. Barroso in for this lesson because he specifically has a lot of great knowledge about Japanese history.
Yes, I've traveled to Japan many times. I've studied Japanese history extensively, and this is a presentation that I made for my students that were a part of the Japan Exchange program. So if you went to Japan with Mr. Barroso, you may have seen some of these slides. So just pretend like you're surprised. All right, so Japanese history. Let's talk about this. There are two periods we're going to look at in this presentation. One is medieval Japan. This is where we see samurai rule as well as civil war breaking out in the Warring States period. Now, don't get this mixed up with the Chinese Warring States period, which is a different period of history entirely. You'd be about 600 or 700 years too late for the start of this one to line up with that one. So we're talking 1185 to 1600 here for the Japanese Warring State period. 1185 to 1333 is what we consider the Kamakura era. Now, this is when we see the samurai rise to power. Now, the samurai, I know we're all at least a little familiar with because of, say, movies and video games and things like that, but we need to understand a couple things to understand the samurai. First of all, this is an authentic picture that was taken of one of the last, what many people would be considered authentic samurai. Back in the late 1800s here, you guys will be talking about the Meiji Restoration later, but this is a gentleman that we can see as an accurate representation of how a samurai warrior would have dressed. And this is in a time for war. This is not like we're sitting and sipping tea and we're wearing this horrifying mask. This is my war outfit here. Now, the samurai are the warrior class. If you have to think of an easier to remember equivalent, you can always think of, like kings and knights in England, right? That's usually the comparison that we see here. The idea that you have a king, or in this case, in the Japanese version, a daimyo, or daimyo. Either way, again, that's the person who's calling the orders. The warrior class then serves this upper class, the daimyo. So this relationship is personal, conditional, and territorial. So if I am a samurai and my daimyo, let's say Mr. Turner's my daimyo, he knows me, we know each other, there are conditions to our relationship, like if he gets into a fight with somebody, I've got to back him up. If he needs me to send some of my peasants and servants to him to help him build something, then that's a part of the condition as well too. But it's also territorial. So I get my own swaths of land. Like I get my own classroom here. I would get my own area of land. I'd get the areas where I was in control. So samurai have political power and influence. And aside from just being considered warriors, they have that kind of influence as well too.
Yeah. Do they get to vote on issues, kind of like we have people here that represent us?
Voting isn't really a thing that we see at this point in Japanese history. We will have influence, certainly, but as far as what word is final, the daimyo will have final word on such things. The samurai, not so much.
So is this more like a monarchy-style government?
Think of this more like a monarchy. There are other layers to it and other subtle differences, but monarchy would probably be the closest equivalent that we could work with.
Okay.
All right, so that's samurai. There's more to be said about them, but I'd get lost for time here. So again, samurai rise to power in the Kamakura age. Prior to this, we had other classes like merchant classes that would have some kind of influence. We'll see them come back and have other influence later. We'll see emperors rise in power, shoguns rise in power. Japanese history is often segmented by who's a ruling class. So Kamakura dominated by the samurai. Now, 1336 to 1573 is Muromachi era, and we receive a couple of things culturally from this era of history that still endure today. So, tea ceremonies being one. Now, this may seem, no pun intended, like a foreign concept to a lot of Americans. Like if I want my tea or if I want my coffee, I just go to Big B and I get it, right? A tea ceremony is a different thing altogether. It's a highly choreographed experience of having tea served to you. Now, it's not just you sitting back and sipping tea and oh, this is great. No, you yourself also take part in some different traditional actions and things that take place. So if I go to a tea ceremony, first of all, I'm going to enter into a room that is meant just for this tea ceremony. I will have to sit and wait in a specific place, and then someone will come out who has been trained to do these ceremonies and will create tea. Now, in the picture here, we see that the woman that's holding this teacup has this kind of whisk, and that's what she's going to use to mix up this tea. If anyone has ever had matcha-style tea, or if you've had matcha-flavored anything, it's that kind of green tea. This is not like a Lipton, like hot water on leaves kind of a deal. This is a different type of mixture altogether. But it's all about aesthetics. It's about the beauty of creating the drink. It's the beauty of the work of the ceramics of the cup, the taste itself, taking in the aroma. There are ways you hold the cup, ways that you drink. You have to rotate the cup to appreciate the artwork of the cup. It's, again, all about the celebration of aesthetics of enjoying tea. So it's, again, not just drinking for the sake of drinking tea's sake. There's more to it than that. Again, these happen still today in Japan. Now, this one is a form of theater that I really enjoy, but Mr. Barroso also likes opera, so remember that. No is one of the oldest styles of theater that we still have in Japan, probably the oldest still practiced form of theater. Now, we'll show you a clip here, and there's a lot of singing. Again, it sounds kind of like opera. But one thing you'll notice is that there's a lot of very slow movements happening, because in No, the actors move like it's slow motion. If I were a No actor and I had to walk across the stage, it would take me a couple of minutes to do so. Again, so what's the purpose behind this? A lot of it shows the intention of movement and the beauty of subtle movements. It's a very physically demanding style of theater. So let's check out a clip here, listen to it, enjoy it together here. So let's skip ahead just a little bit and watch some movement. Oh, wait, there we go. Look at very slow turning movements. Let's hear some more. Very slow steps. Terrifying masks. And the sound, the music you're hearing too, yes, made just by the men that are sitting behind. It's all male voices in this piece too. So it's, again, men singing and playing the drums there too. All right, so that's No theater. Again, I watched a performance of it. It was me and a bunch of old people, and most of the old people fell asleep. I still had a great time. Then 1600 to 1868 is the Warring States period that we see in Japan. Civil war breaks out among different regional warlords, and then we see a massive shift of power, which brings us to our next phase of Japanese history. This is the Edo period in Japan, or what we call Tokugawa's era. Now, if you were a Japanese student, if you were studying Japanese history, you would know the Edo period inside and out. Like, we learn about the American Revolution till, like, we know not all the facts, but we know that probably better than most other subjects. Would you agree with me?
Yeah.
Okay, so Ms. Herman and I both have our backgrounds in history. You learn about the American Revolution a ton, all throughout, from 5th grade to, 12th or so. In the same way in Japan, the Edo period is going to be something that all the students understand inside and out. It is foundational to Japan for so many reasons, and it starts in 1600. Now, the reason why this is such a key point in time is this is the country coming back together following a terrible civil war. And there are 3 historic unifiers of Japan who pull the country back together. We have Nobunaga Oda, Hideyoshi Toyotomi, Ieyasu Tokugawa. So we usually call them by their last names for short, but in Japan we go last name first. So we've got Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, and technically I messed this one up. My apologies, kid. It should be Tokugawa Ieyasu. So Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, Tokugawa. Why were they such a big deal? Again, they unified, but they had different ways of unifying Japan. This is a kind of a folk tale here, where someone asked this question to the 3 warlords. What do you do with a songbird that will not sing? Their answer dictates how they ruled. So, Nobunaga's answer was, if a bird doesn't sing, kill it. Because Nobunaga was known for ruling with an iron fist. He used military strength, he was ruthless. There are some stories that say that he was such a mean, terrible guy that his babysitter committed suicide when he was a child. So just a nasty, mean, naughty guy his whole life. But a really good unifier. So Again, if a bird doesn't sing, kill it. Hideyoshi's answer, if a bird doesn't sing, make it sing. We can tell from the picture there, Hideyoshi had ways of making things happen. So he was known for using more subversion, intrigue, other subtle ways of control as opposed to outright military conquest. Tokugawa, though, again, the one we named the era after, had this to say, if a bird doesn't sing, wait for it to sing. He was known for his patience. Of the three, he was the last one to have power, so he waited for the other two to shape a lot of Japan, and then he struck when the time was right and claimed it for himself. And again, he was known for not pushing things, not being too rash, and it was that patience that ended up paying off. So if you need a good, patience wears off or slow and steady wins the race story instead of telling the story of the tortoise and the hare, talk about Tokugawa. Impress people at parties. A few things from Edo culture that we still see today, some things that you are probably familiar with. Haiku. We've all been writing haikus since we were in just before middle school, right? Now, haikus are, again, we always have the 5-7-5 rule, right? It kind of works in English, it kind of doesn't work sometimes. So I've got some Japanese, again, written in English, or rather in Roman letters here, right? That help us understand what we're saying here, how these sound Japanese. But these are all poems about distilling a specific moment in time. They're all connected to nature. And I'm chosen two from Basho, who is considered to be the grand master of haiku. So this first one, reading it in English. Even in Kyoto, when I hear the cuckoo, I long for Kyoto. So even when he is in this beautiful city, he hears the bird of the region, the cuckoo, sing. He still longs for it even though he is there. Like his love for Kyoto is so deep that he misses it even when he is present. So if we were to read this in Japanese, because in English it doesn't quite flow correctly. Even in Kyoto, when I hear the cuckoo, I long for Kyoto, right? English is not built for haiku. Here it is in Japanese. Kyo ni itemo, kyo natsukashi ya, hototo gisu. Again, it has a lovely flow to it. It's evenly distributed for each line here. It flows. Again, there's something to be said about reading a poem in its original language. Or this one. This is a very famous one. Old pond, frog jumping, splash. Right? So this moment in nature, it's an old pond. We have the surface of the water. It's calm. It's uninterrupted. A frog jumps, splash. He's disrupted the pond. Now, again, we have action. We have a moment. So again, in Japanese, Furui ike ya kawazu tobikomu mizu no oto, or mizu no oto. Again, our English version of it doesn't quite have that same 5-7-5 feel to it, so we've lost a little something in the translation, but we get the same idea here. So, Basho, there are lots of other haiku authors, but he's the best in my opinion. All right. No theater's a lot of fun for some people, but kabuki, I would argue, is a lot more exciting. It's fast-paced, very physical, like No, but at the same time, there's a lot more noise, life, energy. And when we show this clip, watch how quickly this costume change happens for this actor here.
Important characteristics of kabuki theater.
There we go. Did you see it? Went from white to black. There, take a look really quickly. And the guy in black we're supposed to ignore here. He's just like a stagehand. So, one more time.
Important characteristics of kabuki theater
Impressive.
include its particular music, costumes, stage devices, and props, as well as specific plays, language and acting styles, such as the mi, in which the actor holds a characteristic pose to establish his character.
All right, so I know this doesn't look super duper impressive unless you yourself are, say, like a dancer or someone who understands what kind of physical discipline this takes. But as a kabuki actor, to establish your character, as I say, you often have to hold these poses. So this guy is balancing with one foot on the ground against the stick, holding himself perfectly still. I mean, I paused him, but he did that before I hit the pause, right? And he's creating this kind of look on his face to establish his character. It's like in a movie when we have a freeze frame, right? So kabuki is where we get the idea of a cinematic freeze frame. Like he strikes a pose and he holds that while also music's playing in the background. So that's, again, a form of theater that's performed still today, very popular, and whether you know it or not, has had a huge influence on film, especially samurai films, which have had a huge influence on American films. I'm looking at you, Star Wars fans. All right. Another form of theater, bunraku. If you're freaked out by puppets, look away, because it's puppet theater. So I think Ms. Herman and I have some puppet theater planned for you guys soon.
Coming to you soon.
Oh, yeah. So again, don't look at the guys that are wearing all black. They're meant to be ignored, but take a look at how intricate these puppets are. So, again, all these points of articulation, the eyes, the eyebrows, the hands, everything, incredibly detailed. Again, it takes a lot of work to be able to pull these off and work with these. So, again, another form of theater that dates all the way back to the Edo period, bunraku. All right, the last one we want to leave you with is ukiyo-e. You have seen these before, because we've all seen this woodblock print, right? This style of art, this woodblock reproduced print with the heavy contrasts, in this case in the blues and the whites, and little tiny details like the men in the boat, like right here and right here and right here, which you probably have never noticed before until just now because everyone always overlooks them. Again, it's highly detailed, a lot of nature images. We have Mount Fuji in the background there as well too, and done in a woodblock print style. These are incredibly famous, highly influential paintings that come from this era. So again, I know we've all seen this one. We've all probably had an art class where we've studied this style, but ukiyo-e dates back to, again, the Edo period.
So one question I always like to end it with is, what do you wish more people knew about Japan culture and history?
Ooh. For Japanese culture and history, and my students will back me up on this, people need to know more about the food in Japan because it's amazing, first of all. But as far as the history portion itself, not the modern culture, right?
Right.
The history, I would say Japanese history is, and I will say not just Japanese history, but also Chinese and Korean history, because I've studied all of them. One thing I wish people understood was how far-reaching it goes, how far back it goes. Because I know we looked at the beginning of this era, let's see, or what we went to, the medieval period, 1185. Again, that seems like quite a long time ago, but if we look at the earlier records in Japanese history, they go farther back than that, so much farther back than that. And if you look at Chinese history, that goes even farther back than that. I remember when I was studying some history of China in college, I spent the entire semester researching and going over the history of China. And it wasn't until, I think, 1 week till the end of the semester where I finally hit, oh, there's 1776, there we are. Like, to see how small and short term our history is compared to other histories of the world, it gives you a real appreciation for those really ancient cultures. So I wish people knew more about how far-reaching Japanese history is, because it's so fascinating.
Awesome. Well, thank you for helping us go through Japan history. It's always nice to hear a different voice than mine. And hope that you can come around for more later on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.